Hello, valued viewers. I hope you are all doing very well. I have a trivia question for you today, and the question is, what steam locomotive did Lima and Alco last produce as their last entry into producing steam locomotives? Put your answers in the comments below and see what you guys come up with. Again, don't cheat, and I will tell you all the correct answer in my next video. Okay, so many of you might remember me asking you a poll question of sorts that if you were starting a brand new railroad company based on steam locomotives, what locomotive would you start your company with? And much to my surprise, the winning locomotive was some variant of the 284 Berkshire, which is the poll winner, and it wasn't really even close. Again, as surprising as it sounds, but it's true, the Berkshire won out rather easily. And at the same time, I have to tell you all that I'm rather elated that it did, because a little background story about me and my interest in steam locomotives. My passion for these locomotives started with the Nickel Plate Road 757 Berkshire locomotive that at the time was in Strasburg, Pennsylvania, which is now, I think, moved on to Bellevue, Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. But that's where my serious interest and passion for steam locomotives began, was with a 284 Berkshire from the Nickel Plate Road. And subsequently, that's where we took our Etsy shop profile name from, was also from the Nickel Plate Road, of which we use that name in honor of where it all began for my wife and I. So because the 284 Berkshire has so many variants and so many different railroads use them, I'm just going to give a basic breakdown of the locomotive, how it came to be, what it replaced, and the new standards that this design set for future designs. And in that regard, it played a major role. So if you will allow me to say, the Berkshire was a new trendsetter. So the first Berkshire produced was literally the number one built by Lima Locomotive Works, and it was for experimental use. And eventually it was owned by them until it was purchased by the Illinois Central. So the 284 Berkshire was often called the forerunner of all superpower locomotives and the basis and fundamental design of most steam mainline engines built since the original one came out in 1925. The principal objectives to the design over the 282 Mikado was to attain higher horsepower capacity and improved economy of fuel usage. The design achieved both objectives rather easily. The design itself was based largely on an experimental Mikado, which was the number 8000 built in 1922 for the New York Central. One could also say that a non-articulated renaissance of sorts began with the development of the prototype 284 Berkshire. So Lima's A1 prototype was first tested on the Boston and Albany Railroad in February of 1925. While a number of two-axle trailing trucks had been used in the past to improve stability, the principal purpose of one applied to the demonstrator was to increase the size of the heating plant. The Berkshire's four-wheel trailing truck supported a stoker-fed firebox whose 337 square foot of evaporating surfaces exceeded those of the largest Malays at the time. An 8-foot diameter boiler generated dry steam at the then high pressure of 240 pounds to the square inch, which we all know 300 psi in later models was not unheard of. The Berkshires also used Baker valve gears, and these valve gears differed from the Walsher's design by employing a combination of small levers rather than links and sliding blocks to control the action of the pistons in a pair of 28 by 30 inch cylinders. But the motion of this Baker gear was somewhat less smooth. But the wearing areas were limited to inexpensively replaced pivotal bearings. The relative merits between Walsher's and Baker gears remain a subject for inconclusive debate until the last days of steam power. Which one was better, No one really had a true answer for that. Okay, folks, so keep the expectations down to a minimum when and consider that it's 1925. But the experimental A1 Berkshire promptly distinguished itself on a 55-mile run from Selkirk Yard near Albany, New York, to North Adams Junction in Massachusetts, and it was coupled to a 2,296-ton merchandiser. So the A1 Berkshire and the joined 2296-ton merchandiser eases its way onto the main line 47 minutes after one of the Boston and Albany's Mikados, which is the 282, left the same terminal with a 1,691-ton train. Okay, so the experimental Berkshire departs, and it's going upgrade into the Taconic Mountains, and the demonstrator Berkshire overtook the 282 Mikado that left about 47 minutes earlier, and it did it in a little over an hour. So it overtook the Mikado in just over an hour, and then the locomotive lazied to a stop at a siding about 10 minutes ahead of the Mikado. So Lima's bid for sales on this new A1 prototype really paid off for him, because after that demonstration, the Boston and Albany ordered 55 of these new 284s, and then promptly gave them their generic name, as we all know them by now, of Berkshire. And following that sale, the Illinois Central promptly bought 50 of these new Berkshires, including the A1 prototype. Several more railroads bought these new Berkshire locomotives in quantity, and the highest among being the Erie Railroad, who bought 105. The Nickel Plate Road bought 80 of them, and the Chesapeake and Ohio had bought 90 units. All right, so that pretty much wraps up the origin of the 284 Berkshire type locomotive. So with that, the following specifications apply to the final production unit of the 284 Berkshire, which was the Nickel Plate Roads number 779. All right, so the railroad classification for this Nickel Plate 779 284 Berkshire was Sierra 3. The maximum speed was 70 miles an hour. The cylinder size were 25 by 34 inches. Had 2 cylinders. The boiler pressure was still 245 psi. The water capacity was 22,000 US gallons. Fuel capacity was 44,000 pounds, or 22 short tons. It burned coal. The total weight of the locomotive was 808,820 pounds. The adhesive weight was 264,300 pounds. The height was 15 feet 8 inches. The overall length of the locomotive was 100 feet and 8 inches. The driver size was 69 inches. And the factor of adhesion was a very impressive 4.12, which is actually more than some of the articulateds. And as I mentioned, the Nickel Plate Road had built 80 total units of the 284 Berkshire. And the 779 is on static display in Lima, Ohio. The number 757, I believe, don't quote me on this, is now in Bellevue, Ohio. And the number 765 is a active locomotive that runs excursion services out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And with that, I'll wrap up this video, and I'll end it by saying thank you very much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button and the like button, which helps the channel grow. And also visit our print shop at Nickel Plate Limited at Etsy.com. And we thank you once again.